Heroism wasn't in short supply. That is the conclusion of James Hasson and Jerry Dunleavy in their brand new book, Kabul. Kabul's become a bestseller. And I talked to Jerry and James a couple of weeks ago. But the second anniversary of the Abbey Gate bombing was this weekend, so I asked them to come back this morning. James, good morning. Are you surprised that President Biden and Secretary Austin issued statements that did not even name the 13 fallen people at Abbey Gate this weekend?
No, I can't even say that I am. I'm disappointed, but I'm certainly not surprised. In Kabul, one thing that we pointed out is that President Biden has never publicly stated the names of the 13. Not on Memorial Day, not on the first anniversary of the attack, not at the State of the Union, right afterwards. They want this to go away. And one of the reasons that we wrote Kabul was to honor the heroism of those 13 and to make sure that the American people know the full story.
Now, James, the details about the suicide bombing at Abbey Gate may be the most disturbing part of a disturbing book. And the reason Kabul is so disturbing is it lays out the breadth and depth of the leadership failure, not among the people on the ground, but in D.C. And the biggest leadership failure was the failure to prepare for the evacuation and then to allow the sniper to take out the bomber. Would you tell people about that, James?
Yeah, taking those one at a time. First of all, the failure to prepare for the evacuation and the decision to give up Kabul or give up Bagram. One thing that we point out in Kabul is that the suicide bomber himself was in prison at Bagram Airfield on August 15th when the Taliban overran it. And if we hadn't given up Bagram, he would have been behind bars on the 26th rather than standing outside of Abbey Gate. But to your point about the intelligence leading up to it, one thing that we lay out in Kabul in very extensive detail and in the Pentagon's own words is that they had very solid intelligence that ISIS-K was moving to hit the airfield. They had a pretty good description, if not a identical description of who the bomber would be. And there were three opportunities that we detailed that they missed, or they could have used to take out and prevent this attack. And the first one was on the 24th. There was a targeting package for an ISIS-K location in Nangarhar, and that was the location of an individual that we ended up hitting on the 27th after the bombing to prevent a follow-on attack. But we didn't hit them on the 24th out of fears of a negative Taliban response. And then the second thing that we reveal is that an officer testified in an interview with the Pentagon that military intelligence had tracked ISIS-K to a hotel 2 to 3 kilometers from the west, and that because we were relying on the Taliban for our security, relying on the Taliban, General Donahue had to ask the Taliban to raid that location, and of course they never did. And the final piece of this was what you mentioned with Marine Sergeant Tyler Vargas Andrews, who testified in front of Congress that he had a person who matched the description of the bomber in his sights the morning of the bombing. And Army PSYOPs confirmed that he matched the description. He asked for permission to take the shot, and his battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Brad Whitehead, said, "I don't have the authority to give you that shot." And they asked in no uncertain terms, "Well, then who does?" And he said, "I don't know." And they never got an answer. The man disappeared into the crowd, and hours later, there was the carnage that we all saw on our TV screens.
Jerry Dunleavy, your co-author, has joined us. Jerry, I'm holding Kabul. I've been on Fox a few times, and I've had the book in the background a few times. But you guys are not out in public the way. I really do believe that friends of the Biden administration and friends of the Pentagon senior brass are keeping you guys silenced. I've had that confirmed for me. Is that your experience as to why Kabul it's a bestseller, but not thanks to any television coverage?
Well, it is a bestseller, and there's been great response for the book for sure. And the great Catherine Herridge of CBS News did have me on to talk about it. So there has been a little bit of breakthrough there. But yeah, I mean, of course, this is a this is a politically damaging topic for President Biden. I think that his approval rating took a permanent hit because of this debacle. It never recovered, and it potentially never will, because I just think that it put to rest the idea that President Biden was competent. And I think more importantly, I think it put to rest this idea of the empathetic president, because leaving tens of thousands of Afghan allies behind, leaving Americans behind, especially when he had promised days before he left them behind that he would not leave Afghanistan until all Americans were gotten out. Um, a country being handed over to the Taliban, um, 13 Americans getting killed in an ISIS-K terrorist attack that I think, as we lay out in the book, was very likely preventable. These are not the actions of an empathetic commander in chief. And I think that some of those qualities that people were hoping President Biden had, um, you can't really claim that he has them now. And so this is a damaging topic. And so a lot of the media has moved on very quickly from this, and the Biden administration is stonewalling Congress and stonewalling anyone else who's continuing to pursue answers on it. So I think that explains a lot about why there's a little bit of a blackout. But we are breaking through, and we continue to hope to break through further.
I want people to go out and get Kabul and send it to your friends, left, right, and center, because people need to know the facts. James, you're a Marine. Over the weekend, 3 Marines died in a helicopter crash in Australia. 1 Marine Corps pilot died in San Diego at Miramar in a crash landing. Marines know, and the 11 Marines who were killed, the Navy corpsman, the Army sergeant, that they went into harm's way, and they were willing to do that. But I think Marines expect more leadership than they received from Washington, D.C. Do they not? Do they have a right to expect more than they received in the closure of Kabul?
Well, first of all, just to correct the record, I was in the Army.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I
I
had,
thought
I
you were a
had
Marine.
great friends in the Marines, but man, I would get some phone calls if I didn't let that one if I let that one slip. But but to your broader point, Hugh, and we lay this out in Kabul, is that the Marines on the ground at the gates and the paratroopers in the 82nd were just dealt with impossible tasks and witnessed really horrific things. But one thing that came through in a lot of our interviews while we were preparing to write Kabul with these 19, 20, 21 year old junior enlisted, and then also the officers in charge of them, was that they felt that they got no direction from the very top. They felt that there had been no accountability. One common trope is that if a soldier loses a rifle, they're demoted and and disciplined. And if a general botches a major operation, then nothing happens. And I think that unfortunately, we look at General Milley staying in his position. You look at Secretary Austin still in his, and even to the State Department, Secretary Blinken. There's been zero accountability, and I think one reason for that, Hugh, is that forcing some kind of accountability would require the Biden administration to admit that this was not the success that it's trying to gaslight the American people into thinking it is. And that's
It's so obviously not a success. Jerry Dunleavy, let me go back and close with you, if you will, and give us the succinct summary. In terms of accountability, is anyone driving in Congress to get a TikTok on the decision to close Bagram and the documents around it? Because it is clearly, I think, probably the worst decision in any particular military matter that I can recall. And I'm a civilian. I'm not even an armchair general. I'm an armchair civilian. But I read a lot of military history. I just don't recall anything as stupid as the decision to close Bagram and the way in which it was done. Is there any investigation that is producing fruit on that?
Yeah. So the House Foreign Affairs Committee is investigating all of this, including the circumstances surrounding the insane and dangerous and foolish decision to close Bagram. I'm an investigator on the committee, but just my disclaimers, I'm just talking as the author of the book. But the committee already received testimony from Command Sergeant Major Jake Smith, who was in charge, who was tasked with having to close Bagram. And he testified to the committee that in early 2021, he was visited by members of the State Department who were doing a site survey. And he told them in no uncertain terms that to do an evacuation through Kabul would be the height of foolishness, and that if we were going to do an evacuation, we needed to do it through Bagram. And of course, that is not what ended up happening. But so the committee already has testimony from, the high-ranking officer who was tasked with this. So everybody knew that closing Bagram was going to be an insane decision, that it was going to make an evacuation a lot more dangerous, that it was going to make, force us to just be running evacuation out of Kabul. Of course, we had to do that then with the Taliban in control of everything and having to rely on the Taliban for security. And then, of course, the simple fact that Bagram had those prisons with thousands of ISIS-K terrorists who were then immediately freed by the business-like and professional Taliban that the Biden administration liked to refer to. And obviously one of those terrorists killed Americans. And so getting to the bottom of that insane decision is obviously a top priority of congressional investigators. And I expect that we'll get answers on that.
So just to close the loop, it's either going to end up on Biden, on Blinken, or on Austin. They're the civilian leaders. Of those three, who do you suspect?
I think that the ultimate decider here was President Biden. I think that his decisions were what put our troops in this position. But Blinken and Austin bear responsibility for all of this as well. And I would just add to all of this that on Tuesday, a lot of the Gold Star families of the 13 are coming to Capitol Hill to demand accountability. And I just encourage everyone to give that a watch, because it's going to be a powerful moment.
Thank you for making sure that everyone has the facts. Kabul is in bookstores now. People ought to go and get it. It's very easy to remember the title, Kabul. Go to Amazon, go to Barnes & Noble, go to your bookstore. Kabul continues to sell because Americans want to know what happened. Stay tuned. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, James.